The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're going to be beginning here in a minute. Just want to give everyone a chance to get in. While we're waiting, do you guys just mind going into the questions and confirming that you can hear me right now? Great. Thank you very much. We're just going to wait about 30 seconds to give everyone a chance to get in. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our presentation today on keeping archives relevant in our digital world. My name is Erica, and I'm going to be your host today, which means I'm going to help you through a little bit of the house cleaning issues that we have going for this event. So first of all, in the GoToWebinar here, I think a lot of you guys have found that we do have the questions area. This is a very full meeting, and we're probably not going to be able to get to everyone's question, but we do have a section where we will allow you to ask questions to our panelists. So please use that throughout. If we do not get to your question, our panelists have put up their contact information at the end of each of their presentations, and I'm sure we'd be happy to answer your questions with a follow-up email. Also, we are recording this event. We'll be making it available to all participants within the next 2 business days. So if there's something you want to go back to and listen, please feel free to. So with that, I'm going to get this going, and I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Lori Ashley, who is the Market Development Manager here at Preservica.
Thanks, Erica. Good day, everyone. My name is Lori Ashley. I'm a member of the Preservica US-based team. On behalf of the entire Preservica organization, I'd like to welcome and thank you for taking time out of your evolving new normal lives to engage with peers from around the world, celebrate the essential work of archives, and explore how transformations in the way we live, work, play, and learn are impacting the archival profession. And a special thank you to the Society of American Archivists for including us on their conference schedule. During the first hour of this session, these 4 Preservica customers will introduce you to their organizations and describe initiatives and community outreach efforts that are near and dear to their hearts. We will then engage the practitioners in a panel session. So as Erica said, we encourage you to submit questions and comments into the questions dialog box. There are quite a few of you on the call. We're delighted to see all of you. So if we don't get to your question or address an issue of special interest to you, then please reach out to Preservica or directly to the speakers. At the top of the hour, we'll hear from 2 of Preservica's subject matter experts who will discuss innovations in digital preservation practice. They will reflect on how archivists are using enabling technology and community-based initiatives to connect to content sources, streamline, simplify, scale up, and automate core preservation functions. We hope the next 85 minutes will inform and inspire you in the work you all love to do and do so well. And with that, now on to the presentations. First up is Lindsay Hiltunen joining us from the beautiful Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you. So I just want to say welcome to everybody. I'm so grateful to be here to share about some of our initiatives at Michigan Tech and our relationship with Preservica. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about a new initiative, mostly at Michigan Tech, but also with some affiliate organizations. But we're working through something called Mining the Archives, Michigan Miners at Home and Work, digitizing, mapping, and sharing employee records. So as was mentioned, I'm the university archivist at Michigan Tech, and I'm also a PhD student in their Rhetoric Theory and Culture program, where I research intersections of memory, rhetorical production, archives, and public history. I'm just in my student phase, not quite on to candidacy yet, so I'm doing a lot of coursework right now, but I do get to do some wonderful writing that intercedes with my work in the archives. So just a little bit about Michigan Tech. We are a public institution in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, located in Houghton, Michigan. So if you're familiar with the state of Michigan, the UP is, if I'll do the hands thing, we're right up here. And the Houghton, and Michigan Tech is located close to the Peninsula. We're in a part of Michigan known as the Copper Country, just based on our industrial heritage. We had a large mineral land rush here in the 19th century that led to a huge copper boom that lasted into the 1900s, and then it started to wane off by the mid-20th century. Some of our premier collections relate to that industrial heritage. So our three largest collections are the Calumet and Hecla Mining Company's collection, the Quincy Mining Company collection, and the Copper Range Mining Company collection. These are huge corporate records collections that drill down to the granular day-to-day work in the industry, including the ancillary industries like smelting, shipping, and things that related not just to the harvesting of copper, but also how it was utilized, how it was shipped out, and how it really benefited the community and did some detriment to the environment as well. So things that spread many subgenres of historical inquiry. Our patron base at Michigan Tech is very diverse. I mean, of course, we cater to the campus community, including students, undergraduate and graduate, as well as faculty and staff. But we also have a very robust outreach program and work with a lot of people in the local community. We're part of the Keweenaw Heritage Site Network, which is part of the National Park Service. In Calumet, Michigan, which is about 10 miles away, there is an outlet of the National Park Service called the Keweenaw National Historical Park. And their sole purpose is to sort of interpret the history of copper in the region. There are two main outlets to the park, one in Calumet and one in Hancock, Michigan, all very close to the Michigan Tech community. So as an archive, we serve as a community partner with that network to help with the research, interpretation, and preservation of that history. So it's probably one of our robust outreach programs. We also work with the local schools and places across the Western Upper Peninsula. Our collections go beyond the industrial heritage, though. We do have quite a few things that relate just to the broader history of the region, including peoples and places, prominent families, major events. We do have a fairly complete back microfilm of the papers of record from the region dating back to the mid-1800s. And we have a lot related to the local sports culture, particularly hockey, which I'm most interested in. With that, we'll move on to the next. So getting into our digital initiatives at Michigan Tech, we started dabbling into this quite a few years ago, I would say in maybe like the mid-2000s. My predecessor, Eric Nordberg, had been working with one of the web developers at the university. They did get some grant money, and they also just had some innovation taking place on campus that they were able to set up a .NET framework, which allowed them to get some of their images online and get some of those digital images online or digital surrogates of physical things that we had in the collection. So it was a homegrown platform and it wasn't really being updated and maintained. When I came on board at Michigan Tech in 2014, we knew that we needed to come up with something that was longer lasting, had this concept of digital preservation in mind, but also had support for the types of collections that we wanted to get online. So the first thing that we did was we migrated roughly 11,000 images from our Keweenaw Digital Archive into the Preservica platform. And we renamed the public interface of that to the Copper Country Historical Images database. And we continued to add to that, just either scanning or uploading born digital products into Preservica. And you can access those online at cchi.mtu.edu. And there's a lot of wonderful images. One that I've shared on the slide here of two gentlemen eating their lunch in a mine shaft at Quincy Mine. But, you know, we're looking for ways to not just build our digital assets and images, but also look at other types of digital products and media. So that's sort of what brings us into the grant project that I'll be talking about on the next slide. But we also have some film that we've recently digitized that we're looking to upload as well. So we're getting away from just still images and moving into a variety of different digital assets. So recently, the Michigan Tech Archives, in partnership with the Social Sciences Department at Michigan Tech and the Spatial Lab at Michigan Tech, We were awarded $240,000 from the Council on Library and Information Resources, Digitizing Hidden Special Collections program. We had applied to that project a year previously and we weren't accepted. So this to me is just like a good opportunity. Like if you don't succeed at first, try again. We were able to take some comments from the review panel from that initial application, tinker with our proposal and make it more strong for how it aligned with what CLEAR's objectives and initiatives were. So we were able to sort of reframe how we thought about our project, and that made us successful in the next granting cycle. So, you know, don't be dismayed if you don't get funding right off the bat, just keep trying. So with that, we're in the early few months of this project to develop a sister portal to CCHI, and this will be mining company records from the Calumet and Hecla Mining Company collection. There's over 40,000 employee cards within that sub-series of the collection, front and back, so we're talking about 80,000 still images that we're going to be scanning. And then we're going to pull all of that rich metadata off the card. We have a team of just over 10 student assistants working on the transcription of those cards, as well as we were able to hire a digitization specialist to help sort of help coordinate that student effort, along with one of the faculty in social sciences. They've been leading that charge. So it's been really interesting to see how students from various disciplines are interpreting what's written on these cards, because there's all sorts of familial information as well as information about the individual, the wages that they made, codes that they used for the mines that they worked at, and there's just all kinds of different things that we have to decipher because there was quite a coded language within those cards. And then how a student interprets it might be different from how a different student interprets it. So we've been having some really rich conversations about what things mean or how we should go about transcribing them for what will then become the descriptive metadata to associate with that image card once it's online. It's really quite fascinating. We've also been very grateful. I'm sure everyone has their COVID-19 and pandemic stories. Many of us at Michigan Tech have been working from home since March, but we've been able to keep our student assistants employed if they've been able to have enough of an internet connection that we can actually work with them remotely during this time. We've been using the platform Slack for our inter-office communication and keeping the team coordinated. So we're chatting every day, just slacking back and forth to stay in touch. But our manager of technology and innovation was able to develop this really great fixed fields form that students can take scanned images from our shared drive online, and they can still do the transcription work from home. And then we have the Slack platform for communication. Since we can't meet face to face, like we can at least talk about you know, if they're having trouble with a particular code or if they need help deciphering what something is on a card. And then our digitization specialist is working on site right now, so he's able to work with the manager of technology and innovation to make sure that the team is moving forward, and we also have enough material scanned, because the scanning actually does take place in the archives, you know, making sure that there's enough for those that are working remotely. So we're still plugging ahead, even though things in the world isn't exactly as we had hoped it would be. I'll keep this short since we have some other panelists, but I'll take any questions at the end of our session here, and you can email me anytime. On this next slide, you can see my contact information. It's best to email me at my personal address, which is lehalkol@mtu.edu. But if you email me at that copper email address, that'll get into our LibAnswers ticketing system, and I'll get a nudge that that's there as well. And please check out our website, and we'd like any feedback or comments. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Leslie. That was great. We know a little bit about mining here in Wisconsin too. It's part of our rich heritage as the Badger State. So our next speaker is Ashton Wingate, Digital Archivist for the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, a not-for-profit civil rights organization and law firm headquartered in New York City. Welcome, Ashton.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Ashton Wingate. I'm a digital archivist within the Thurgood Marshall Institute at the NAACP Legal and Educational Defense Fund. The Archives Department at the Thurgood Marshall Institute serves three major functions: building and managing an archival repository, providing library services to staff, including research support, and overseeing the records management function for the firm. I'm happy to represent the Legal Defense Fund and the archives team today as we talk about our work in the context of keeping archives relevant in a changing world that's becoming more and more reliant on digital information resources. During the presentation today, I hope to provide you all with a brief overview of what types of material that are contained within our archive, how to access those materials through Preservica, and the way that that access impacts the important work that the Legal Defense Fund does, as well as our goals for the future and how Preservica will help us in achieving those goals. So, who is the Legal Defense Fund? Simply put, we are a nonprofit law firm, but we're really much more than that. We are America's premier legal organization that fights for racial justice through litigation, advocacy, and public education. We seek structural changes to expand democracy, eliminate disparities, and achieve racial justice and equality for all Americans. The Legal Defense Fund was born out of the NAACP, and as an independent organization, we have an 80-year history, and we're actually celebrating the anniversary of that this year. Over that time, we have collected roughly 250 boxes of records that are now at the Library of Congress, over 10,000 boxes in offsite storage of case files, and an ever-increasing number of digital records. I'm sure that many on the call can sympathize with that. Additionally, we have two libraries, one in New York and one in DC, located both in our offices in each location. We have an art collection and some other objects and artifacts related to our organization's work. Outside of preservation, the most important thing that we do as an archives department is provide context to the ongoing fight for civil rights through giving our staff access to LDF's archival records. Our president and director counsel, Sherilyn Ifill, is adamant that everything our organization does, from litigating cases to political advocacy on Capitol Hill to community organizing and educating the public, it must be viewed through a historical lens and informed by the work that LDF has done in the past. And so we play a very important part in that process. It's a tall order. We don't always have exactly what staff are looking for. We're a small team of 3 people, and we don't have as much time as we'd like to process our growing backlog of material. We really try to find the synergies and work seamlessly with other departments in the organization. And we're always trying to find new tools, resources, and workflows and refine processes to get better, which of course brings us to Preservica. Sorry, the lag time there is giving me some trouble. So we currently use Preservica as our sole repository for digital records. We like the robust preservation capabilities, the granular security settings, especially being in a law firm, its ability to handle legacy data and file types, as well as its ability to grow and scale with us as we grow as an archive. We're a very young archival institution. We've only been around since 2014, and Preservica has been with us for about 4 or 5 years, so pretty much every step of the way as we've been building up our foundation here in the archives department. We've chosen to digitize various collections that we know are high priority and have been useful, especially to our legal staff, for research purposes. These include our docket reports, which are procedural case descriptions that go month by month throughout the years, and as well as annual reports, which provide contextual and often very detailed snapshots into specific cases that we've litigated, and LDF activities, Legal Defense Fund activities at any point in time over the organization's 80-year history. We have a full collection from our Division of Legal Information and Community Service, which led the way on initiatives like SNAP benefits, free and reduced school lunches for children, minority women employment, school busing, and much more. We also have our Death Row USA reports, which is a complete history of statistics related to capital punishment and demographic information on death row inmates from about 1975 to present. And we collaborated with the Death Penalty Information Center on that project. As far as just the types of material, it's pretty run-of-the-mill stuff. It's PDF, it's images, it's video, things of that nature. But already with a minor fraction, really, of our archival records digitized and accessible to staff, it's really proved to be an invaluable resource. We are continually adding to it. In addition to our high priority collections, we plan on experimenting or beginning to experiment with email archiving, legacy file conversion and preservation, as well as opening up our collections to the public, which is a huge decision for us. As a law firm, there's a lot of privileged and sensitive information that we cannot share with the public. And so we're trying to formulate a nuanced plan that will allow us to share more of our history with researchers, academics, historians, and the general public. You know, as you might imagine, with the current times that we're in, our information, our history is more relevant than ever. And we really want to ramp up the process to make sure that we are more and more a part of the conversation, adding context to the conversation that's happening every day about civil rights, about racial justice, and about what's going on, which of course leads us to staying relevant. You know, I thought about this question in the brief time that I've been with the Legal Defense Fund and been working in this with these collections and with these items, and you know, I kind of separated it into two different sections: being relevant inside your organization, you know, strategically working with your organization and your staff outside of your archives department, and being relevant externally. So internal communication with staff has been huge for us. It's always important to stay in communication with your customers, really, for us. So that's LDF staff, that's our lawyers, that's our communications department, that's our development department, which does fundraising and relies on history for narratives to do that work. Part of that communications process internally is really recruiting evangelists and cheerleaders inside your own organization that can tell others about the services that you have to offer. Again, part of that communication is polling your internal audience, probing them, asking them questions. The most important question that we ask all the time is just, how can we help and how can we be involved? Strategically, of course, aligning your efforts with the organization's overall strategy is important. We consider our legal strategy when we're talking about the work that the archives does, the collections that we're looking to digitize. We consider our community organizing strategy, our communication strategy, all of that kind of goes into the priorities for the archives work. Getting in on the ground floor has been important for us. Being there at the right time when projects are getting started so that they can begin with that archival context instead of coming in sort of on the back end or as things are wrapping up has been useful for us. And finally, for the internal audience is creating products. So creating those research tools, really being able to describe them and refine them in ways that allow us to kind of sell them to our own staff, to say, you know, this is what we've created, this is what you can use it for, this is why it will be beneficial to your work. For external audiences, again, you know, our collections are closed to the public, but you know, working with our communications department for external communication has been really, really useful and helpful. Our work and our collections have been featured in documentaries, have been featured in ads in the New York Times, and of course are essential for our communications department's social media strategy. And part of that is really helped us insert that historical context and this archival information in the conversation that's happening now on social media every day. Of course, it's easy for the Legal Defense Fund to, you know, take a stand and insert our conversation in that way, but we encourage other organizations to do the same thing in the ways in which that they can. The Fight for the fight for racial justice is one that takes place every day all across this country in every facet of life. So there's more than likely something in your collection that speaks to that, and sharing that through social media, using that strategically to align with your message about the cause that you support is important. And of course, it really adds important context to the conversation. Being able to add factual information to those interactions online is really important. Of course, the more that we digitize, the easier it is to kind of be there in that external communication. So it's been really helpful for us to outsource a lot of our digitization to a external vendor. And we've got one that we've been really pleased with and has a quick turnaround for us. So and it's close by in New Jersey. So it's been really useful. And again, just sort of putting yourself out there as an archivist, as a subject matter expert, being able to represent your organization and speak for them using the archival collections externally has been useful as well. As far as our future plans for the archive, we plan on building a comprehensive case material collection, which will be the foundation of our public-facing website. With over 6,000 cases that we've litigated during our 80-year history, each case number that's assigned to each case, that's our unique identifier, it gives us an anchor upon which to attach the bulk of LDF's archival records and determine what should be public and what should be private. Whether it's correspondence or photographs, depositions, discovery case files, and other objects, 9 times out of 10, it is related to a case. So that's essential for us. We're working with a vendor on cleaning up our data, which is currently housed inside several spreadsheets. And from there, we're going to solidify our taxonomy and our metadata schema, and then we'll be uploading that data into Preservica, with each case essentially being a folder that will house the objects that are related to that case. We've been discussing with the Preservica team about some customization options that will really allow us to display and showcase this rich case information. We have about 28 fields of data for each case, and in a way that will be informative and easily consumed by the general public. The next step after that will be tackling our non-case material, which is a little bit more difficult to describe, and then we'll really be sort of on our way as a public-facing archival resource and tool. So once we've got that to a good place, we'll be sharing that with other institutions, libraries, universities, consortiums, to promote the existence of the archive. So essentially our roadmap to staying relevant is continuing to build and define ourselves as a definitive source for civil rights legal history, and more specifically, a complete history of the Legal Defense Fund's role in the fight for justice. Thank you, and happy to take any questions at the end of the presentation.
Thanks, Ashton. That was great to get a view inside your organization at this historically important time. So thank you very much. And we move on now to our third speaker, who is Dr. Gregory Hunter, professor at Long Island University. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here. And though we couldn't be together in person, I am happy to be able to share with you some information about a partnership that we are doing with community archives and local historical societies on Long Island in Nassau and Suffolk counties. When I finished a 6-year term as editor of the American Archivist, I was looking for another challenge, looking for something to help my students, but also as a Long Islander, looking for something that would help the community to preserve its own history. So this is a project that we've been involved with since 2017, and I'm happy to give you an insight into it as a potential model for working with community archives in your own parts of the country or parts of the world. There is a slight lag time, as we're all finding out. There we go. So the idea of working with community archives was developed in partnership with the Robert David Lyon Gardner Foundation, which is very interested in history in general, but is a big supporter of local history in the metropolitan New York area. As you can see from this slide, we've been very fortunate, very blessed, in that they have given us $1.5 million to develop this project as a model for others to use, as well as making an impact on Long Island. There we go, some project goals. The Gardner Foundation identified more than 150 community archives, mostly historical societies, but also significant community organizations in Nassau and Suffolk counties on Long Island. They asked us if we could help develop a model to work with them. Most of these community archives are organized by volunteers rather than paid staff. So one of the challenges was how to work with a community archives that's volunteer run to digitize materials for them. In our case, the community archives were not able to digitize their own materials. And part of our role on Long Island is talking about standards for digitization and trying to help historical societies begin what we hope will be an ongoing process that they eventually will take responsibility for as well. Our goals are to digitize, to capture images, promote access to them, and to protect them from disaster. Anyone who's followed the weather the last couple of days, Long Island got another chance to show that it's vulnerable to disaster as a hurricane rolled through. So that is one of our goals. I also wanted our students to have the best set of skills possible for their professional careers, not only to be able to digitize rare historical materials, but to be familiar with Preservica and to be able to use that as they were seeking employment. A key project goal is that we are establishing partnerships. I am not building a collection at Long Island University. We are establishing partnerships with community archives, with friends groups, and one very interesting partnership where the National Park Service's Fire Island National Seashore is providing a location where Fire Island communities, and there are more than a dozen of them, can bring their materials to a safe place and our students can scan the materials there. So we are working as partners. We are not trying to build anything locally, and we are trying to work with the community archives in particular to help them achieve their strategic purposes. What do they want to do? What are their top priorities? We are not dictating that we will do every diary on Long Island. So the materials that we are digitizing vary by the historical societies and the community archives. And there, trust me, there is another slide that will wake up eventually. Okay, there we go. So the approach to the project was to have the work done by students, to give students the skills. The students do the digitizing. They capture the materials on site at historical societies and local archives, or at our campus facility at the LIU Post campus in Nassau County. The grant enabled us to buy some top-flight digitization equipment. The scans are just beautiful, and the students are working with high-end digitization equipment. I've also been able to fund doctoral students, PhD students in information studies, to help with quality control checks and the preparation of metadata. Each student receives 6 credits of tuition remission for every semester that they are involved. They give 120 hours to the project for 6 credits of tuition remission. And we're just to the point now where one of our students has had a completely free master's degree because she has been involved with the project from its very first days. So again, our approach is not to hire full-time staff, but to have the students do this. Our approach as well in terms of Preservica was to make certain that that I was not spending my time building a local project, a local infrastructure, but using one that already existed. And we can all wait for the lag to move to the next slide. Okay, there we go. So this is a project that's going through 2022. We have plans to continue working with the local historical societies and community archives up until then. Up until this point, we've captured over 54,000 images. We had to, as with everyone, shift gears very quickly in the middle of the spring semester. So our image count was down a bit, but I was then able to switch students to do more work with Preservica, which was a real advantage for them moving forward. We will continue to work with the community archives through 2022, and everything is going into Preservica rather than having us build a local repository. Let me go to the next slide. So how are we using Preservica? As Lindsay talked about switching from an on-campus solution to Preservica, and Ashton talked about using Preservica pretty much from the start. Our approach was similar to Ashton's in that I didn't want to spend my time working with building an on-campus solution. My time is spent out in the field with the community archives and with my students as they work on the project. So everything that we scan is being stored in the Preservica Cloud Edition. We are storing high-resolution TIFF files, and from there we can deliver them in other formats. But everything we are capturing is a high-resolution TIFF. A key point is that each community archives retains ownership of and control of its materials in Preservica. As I said before, they don't have to turn over materials, the ownership to me. They retain control. The community archives can download images and metadata. They can export them. It's their images. They can do whatever they want with them. They also get a copy of all the images on an external hard drive outside of Preservica, so that we have as many copies as possible to keep everything safe. During the grant period, the Preservica fees are paid by the Gardner Foundation. At the end of the grant, we have some options that we're already talking about in terms of the images that are there. Up until this point in the project, the images are being reviewed by the historical societies. As Ashton talked about, there are going to be some items that we don't want to make available. The historical societies, one in particular, has some a medical diary from the 19th century for a physician who walked around town. So the Historical Society will determine whether or not those are publicly available and accessible. So we will, in the fall, begin granting access to the public so that the materials that the Historical Societies do want to have publicly available are out there. It will be up to 80 historical societies and community archives. The access point will be in one place. So the public will be able to search across all 80 historical societies for a particular family name, community organization, or an event. So we're really looking forward to turning on public access this fall. And my last slide. Or I guess I have a couple more. Well, I'm talking about a project on Long Island, but I'm actually in Florida visiting with three of my grandchildren who are under 6. So Disney Plus, I watched Hamilton the other day. Who lives, who dies, who tells your story? If I can go to the next slide. Really what our project is doing is building a partnership to help the community archives on Long Island tell the stories of Long Islanders. So that is our purpose, to help the community archives to move along in their strategic objectives and to build a partnership with them at Long Island University so that we can preserve and make accessible the important stories that they have and that they are documenting. And there is just one last slide that is contact information. Again, I'd be happy to talk to anyone about this. We did hope that this would be a model for others in other parts of the country, other parts of the world. We've been very successful, we believe, with the local communities as well as our students. So please, I'd be happy to have you send me an email, and we'll try to publicize through professional listservs and other places when you can see the images from the historical societies online through Preservica. So our Preservica partnership has been great. Just one last comment is that I've been involved with the folks who built Preservica before there was a Preservica. Some of the engineers and I were a part of the Lockheed Martin team that built the electronic records archives for the National Archives and Records Administration. So that partnership goes back to 2004, before there was Preservica. So I'm looking forward to our continued partnership and having Preservica help us to tell those stories of Long Islanders. thanks very much for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions after this session or as a part of the Q&A. Thanks again.
Thanks, Greg. You're dating yourself there a little bit with that long-term connection with Preservica, so we're grateful for that too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our fourth and final presenter is Marta Crilly from the Boston City Archives. Welcome, Marta.
Thank you. So it's wonderful to be with you all today, and I'm looking forward to talking about how we're using Preservica to teach neighborhood history in Boston Public Schools. So like Lori said, my name is Marta Crilly, and I'm the archivist for reference and outreach at Boston City Archives. I also manage our Preservica instance. So the Boston City Archives is the archives for Boston's municipal government. Our records are public, local government records, and they belong to the people of Boston. As a city government department, one of our goals has been to collaborate with Boston's public schools to provide them with primary source resources for their classes. And one challenge that we have faced in this endeavor is our location. We are not central to the city, and we are not easily accessible by public transit. This is a film of researchers journeying to the city archives in January of this year. And so our location makes it very difficult, if not impossible, for classes to come to the archives and look at records. When we do have students come, they are usually well-resourced upper or middle-class students who have a parent or another friend or relative who can drive them and spend an afternoon at the archives with them. So in the spring of 2018, I was connected with two Boston teachers. One was a teacher at a charter school, and one was at the Jeremiah Burke High School. And both of these teachers were interested in thinking innovatively about how we could work primary sources into their classrooms to work on neighborhood history projects. And so I'm going to talk about my work with one of these teachers, Dr. Catherine Petta, at the Jeremiah Burke High School. So the Burke High School is located in Dorchester, which is Boston's largest neighborhood. Dorchester is over 70% people of color. It's 33% foreign-born, and it is a neighborhood that is really quite representative of Boston's population. The Burke High School is a high school that recently exited turnaround school status, which means that it was low performing to the point that the state of Massachusetts took it over until student performance improved. Just some details about the student body. They are 98% students of color. 61% of them are economically disadvantaged. 50% have a first language that is not English, and 35% are currently learning English. So Dr. Petta and I worked together to brainstorm ways that we could present archival resources to her students without having them come to the archives, which is really just impossible for a variety of reasons, not least of which was our location. Because we do have a Preservica instance with a universal access site, students could access collections remotely from their classroom. And so we decided to use our Preservica instance to help students access resources for a year-long neighborhood history project. So rather than Dr. Petta's students coming to me, I came to her students. I worked with 3 groups of students for a total of 9 classes. I would open each class by talking for about 10 to 15 minutes, usually closer to 10 minutes than 15. And for the rest of the time, the students either had an assigned activity with pre-chosen records that we had picked out, or they would be searching our Preservica instance to work on their research and writing. And while they did that, Dr. Petta and I circulated and gave one-on-one help to the students. I gave my email address out to students so they could email me throughout the week, and I could send them research tips, records I had scanned for them, or links to records that were already in Preservica. So by the end of spring 2019, I had connected with 90 students at the Burke. And I have to say, it is hands down the best outreach project that I have implemented. I don't have time to give you a full narrative of what the project entailed, but I do want to share first a list of lessons learned about teaching at the Burke, and then some insights that we gained about how we could improve our Preservica instance, both for high school students and for other researchers who were doing neighborhood history research. So I'm going to start with a few lessons that I learned teaching at the Burke. And I hope these will be helpful for other people who are considering doing these kinds of classes in public schools. So the first thing that I learned is that it's very important to work with the right teacher. While both teachers that I worked with were excellent educators, Dr. Petta had a vision for engaging with the archives and with cultural heritage resources and wanted me on board as a collaborating partner. And I think that's really key. I don't think you can do this kind of project without the right kind of collaborative teacher. Number two, I had to learn to listen to the teacher and to the community of students. So I had a lot of ideas about what kinds of sources these students would find helpful. And after working with the first teacher, the charter school teacher, I realized that my ideas were almost entirely wrong. So when I sat down with Dr. Petta, I said as much. And she said, you know what, Marta, my students are into anything weird, sad, or gross. And we don't need to shy away from that. So with that in mind, I actually made a Google Drive that I entitled Gruesome, Weird, and Gross Boston History. And here's an example of one of the records that was in that drive. The drive was full of records from insane asylums, orphanages, workhouses, hospitals, and the sewer department. Highlights included autopsies of cholera victims, maps of offensive smells, surveys of tenements, and documentation of people institutionalized for all kinds of reasons. You can see that here. And the students were totally into this. They really enjoyed this. It drew them in. Number three, which is related, is don't sanitize history. So the students at the Burke do not live a sanitized existence, and they are not interested in a sanitized history. Part of the reason I think that they gravitated to records about sanitation, mental health, neighborhood violence, and police violence is that these are issues with which they deal on a daily basis. Sometimes discussing these historical and present issues made me, a pretty privileged white lady, uncomfortably aware of my own privilege. But what I learned is you can live with that discomfort. It'll be fine, I promise. Number four, I learned how important it was to work with students one-on-one. So Dr. Petta was wise enough to know that the students would need one-on-one help, especially with searching Preservica. Most of our class time was spent with her and I circulating and giving the students one-on-one assistance with their research. And this was really important because the students were often in wildly different places in terms of English language skills, reading comprehension, and technology skills. But it was also very important because it gave the students and I a chance to connect one-on-one. So they could ask me granular, detailed questions about their neighborhood history, and I could walk them through the steps that they needed to go through to find those answers. Number five, I learned to roll with the punches. When I was in the classroom, we had various disruptions and a few disciplinary issues come up. And what I learned is that the teacher knows how to handle these situations. So you just follow their cue and you work and you focus on working with the students. Displaying shock, being precious about things isn't helpful, and it just alienates the students. And then finally, I learned that it's really important to listen to the students and to learn from them. I had a lot to share with the students, but the students also had so much knowledge of their neighborhoods to share with me. One of my favorite moments in the class was when a student I had gotten to know said to me, Miss Curley, you just sit yourself down and let me tell you all about Mattapan. And then she proceeded to tell me all sorts of fascinating things and stories about the groups of people that lived in her neighborhood and things that had happened in her neighborhood. And this was not only just interesting and fun, but it also established a reciprocal relationship between the two of us. So my work gave me some helpful insights about ways that we could improve our Preservica user interface, as well as kind of these teaching lessons that I've shared. And so after this experience, we were able to improve our interface in order to help other Bostonians use the interface to do their own neighborhood history research more easily. So I just want to share two insights that were very helpful that we gained from this class. So the first insights that I gained was the value of virtual collections. The students were often very confused by searching and by using facets. They also often wanted to browse records about their neighborhood to see what they came across. So based on their feedback, I realized that we needed to create browsable virtual collections organized by record format, record type, and geographic location. And here are some examples of that. And the virtual collection, or the ability to create virtual collections by these different format, type, and geographic topic was really invaluable in helping to make these records more browsable for users. I also gained a lot of insights by watching students search our repository. Their searching process is definitely not my searching process, but it is probably more reflective of how the average person searches our universal access portal. So by watching them, I realized that we really needed to do more to enable keyword searching. So we've started to enable this by having interns and staff members write more robust descriptions of many of our records with a focus on keywords that researchers might search. So you can see an example here where in the description of this oral history, we have included just a list of topics, landmarks, streets, and associations, as well as a number of other things that researchers might search for. You can also see how much more detailed and robust this description is compared to the LCSH headings that we've added. Those LCSH headings are really important for a variety of searching and browsing reasons. They're essential, but they're not as comprehensive as the keywords that we've added into the description of those records. And those keywords really help with searching. So that is a very quick and dirty narrative of my experiences using Preservica to teach neighborhood history at BPS. Priorities at Boston Public Schools have shifted with COVID, but I am still in contact with the teachers that I have worked with, and we are planning to continue this project in the future, and so I'm very excited about learning from students in the future. I look forward to answering your questions and to talking more, but also please feel free to reach out to me if you have questions or want to chat. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Thanks, Marta. If we could have the speakers turn your webcams on so we can see you during the panel discussion. And I'm going to direct the first question to Marta while I've got you on the line. Just wondering if your one-on-one work and the activities that you had inspired any of those young students to consider archives as a profession.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I don't know if they were inspired to choose archives as a profession, but we definitely had students who were interested in majoring in history, or even just like taking some history courses in college. The charter school actually is a charter school for health sciences. So a lot of those kids are kind of gearing up to go into health sciences. And one of them told me, yeah, I don't like history. I don't like writing. I just want to do science. But now that I've done this, maybe I'll take a history class in college.
Okay, that's a positive development. So thank you for that. There's a question about privacy, and I want to direct that sort of one part to Lindsay and one part to Ashton. So there's a question, Ashton, about if you could share a little bit more about the process of how you folks internally are deciding about how to handle some of that private or information before you allow the case files to become public. And Lindsay, the question for you is about, were there concerns, or how are you handling privacy issues or personally identifiable information in those corporate archives and those corporate records? So maybe Ashton, if you could take the question first and then over to Lindsay.
Yeah, so we are working on a process with our lawyers, both past and present, to review case files and other information to decide on what is privileged or sensitive information, and to ascertain whether or not we can redact or weed it out, or whether it's simply, so full of that type of information that we do have to, have it remain private. Now, due to the nature of the litigation process, there's a number of items or records that come out to the public through the process of the case. And so those are easy for us to share. Those are easy for us to upload and put up on a case file. So regardless of whether or not, the majority of the case file is privileged or sensitive, there are some kind of basic informative documents that we can upload and attach to each case. So to answer the question, there is a review process. We're refining that, and encompasses both current staff and lawyers who have, since retired or, moved on, but are still willing to review the cases that they did litigate in their time here at LDF. Not to get into Lindsay's piece of it, but PII, of course, is a big one for us as well, and something that we're tackling.
So just a little bit of follow on that. There's a question about cataloging. So you mentioned that you were going to put case materials into a folder. And so the question is, are you going to need to catalog at a more granular level or permission at the document level beyond the folder level that you described?
Yes, definitely. We, as much as we can, we're going to try to sort of group that stuff together within the case file, so that there's just sort of a secure folder of things that only LDF staff can see. But it's something that we're still working through at that granular level.
Thank you. And Lindsay, what about those corporate records?
Sure. So we're pretty grateful within this sub-series of the collection. The employee record cards all have the same template. So when we do the scanning, we can easily identify things that we know absolutely have to be censored or scrubbed from the card. To give for instance, the Social Security information for some of those later employee cards. So we've developed a system, once we're going through and scanning, like we keep a log of those cards that have information that is sensitive or needs absolutely to be removed from the card. And then we're just going to digitally erase it before it's actually uploaded into Preservica. And then for some things that we do think is sensitive now, but may be permissible in the future, we're trying to develop a system where we come up with essentially an embargo system for that information that will scrub it out now, but then we can release that information in the descriptive metadata in the future. But we don't quite have that process worked out yet. And this is partially because we're working with our partners in social sciences that have a different public interface than what we have in the library. So once you get things into Preservica, they're also going to live in something called the CUNA Time Traveler, which is the GIS system that they're developing as part of the CLEAR project. And they have the platform set up, but the way that information is accessed is very different in their platform versus what we're doing with Preservica. So we're just trying to figure out what the best technical workflow is for that as well. But I'd be happy to share that information with anyone interested in the future as we come up. I do speak at conferences quite a bit, and I'm always available on email. So thanks.
Thanks. Sounds like you've got some great collaboration across different areas of the university. So thank you. So Greg, I have two questions for you. One, I wanted to know, is there a waiting list for students to be engaged in your program? I know it's a time commitment, but that tuition coverage is kind of nice. And then wondering if you could share any feedback that you've gotten from some of the small historical societies once they're able to see their collections digitized and think about the improved access that they're going to have to their stakeholders.
Sure. In terms of the students, the Gardner Foundation has enabled me to move money around. So I have been able to help more students. It was targeted at 14 per semester. I've been able to have students work in the summer as well. And this fall, since I had some unspent money, I may have about 18 master's students. So students are very interested in this. It counts for their internship requirement for the master's degree, though they also don't have to use it for that if they choose. So far I've been able to help get the right number of students. Because of the on-site requirement, 2 days a week, 5 hours a day, there is sort of a natural cutoff that not all students can do that while working full time. In terms of the historical societies, the volunteers are thrilled to see the materials that they have lovingly cared for and preserved. Some of the volunteers, they've been doing this for decades. They're in their 80s. No one knew what they had. They are just so thrilled to see the materials scanned and to know that it's going to be available, that their life's work, that their commitment to local history on Long Island is going to be passed on to future generations. So they are absolutely thrilled. some of the fragile materials, bound materials, glass plate negatives that they have that they know that they would never be able to deal with on their own with their own resources. The fact that those things are being made available and preserved, they are just thrilled. And just one last comment, the Fire Island folks are thrilled. Fire Island materials are at risk from a high tide. So those communities are absolutely ecstatic that our partnership with them and the National Park Service is enabling their history to be preserved off Long Island in a cloud-based system. So the fee, you know, they would all like us to do more, and we would like to do more, but this is a pilot project, and we'll see what happens come 2022 in terms of extending it.
Well, it sounds incredibly gratifying, so thank you for sharing that. And as the last speaker, I'm going to give the last question to Marta before we turn to our Preservica folks. A question is, can the students access the Preservica repository from home or only at the school?
So students can access it from both school and home. One thing I will say is that most of the students do not have computers at home, and so often they are accessing it only at school, which is one of the reasons it was so important for us to build in time for them to search in class where they have access to a computer. A lot of students did, however, search it on their phones at home. And so for that reason, it was really helpful and wonderful that the Preservica UA is mobile friendly, because that is how a lot of students were searching it at home.
Fantastic. So thank you, Marta, Lindsay, Ashton, and Greg, for sharing your passion and your preservation plans, and for shining a light on the way that your archives are forging and strengthening community ties. Stay safe and be well, and enjoy the rest of the presentation. In the final half hour of our open community session, we're now going to hear from Preservica's John Tilbury and Peter Anderton. In their respective roles as Chief Innovation Officer and Vice President for Product Development, John and Peter have direct lines to the voice of our customers. While Peter keeps a steady hand on the rudder of our product roadmap, John and his team engage regularly with competitors, thought leaders, and expert practitioners to fuel Preservica's quest to identify, research, test, and prototype solutions to the ever-changing challenges and opportunities that all of you face in your essential work of capturing, describing, preserving, protecting, and providing access to valued digital content. Over to you, John.
Thank you very much. Yes, we've been doing this for a long time, even predating our work with Greg on the ERA project back into the last millennium. And it is just fantastic to see how far this community has progressed over the years. If we could go on to the next slide. This is a global community. These are the face-to-face meetings that we had last year. The bottom one was our meeting in Austin. And, you know, a lot has changed this year. We're now doing it online. We're now talking to a lot more people. And we're now getting to a situation where I don't have a hangover, the size of which I acquired on 6th Street in Austin, which is a lot more healthy as well. So, but we're all working together as a community to solve global problems of digital preservation and keeping the information that we are so proud of and is so important safe. If we go on to the next slide, there is a traditional apocryphal, I think, curse, may you live in interesting times. And we are the generation that has had to pioneer the change from physical to digital information and how that is managed, archived, and preserved. When I started my career, way back in the last millennium, almost all information was on paper. When I retire, I expect almost all information to be digital. And that is an incredible change over a very short period. At the moment, if you throw in a global pandemic and some rather unpredictable political choices that our countries are making, I think we can safely say that these are definitely interesting times. The move to digital is both a challenge and an opportunity. I think we're moving from challenge to opportunity, and that's quite exciting. We can now see that if we work together as a diverse community, whether you use Preservica or not, we're solving problems that everyone is facing. And the energy and the excitement of the speakers we heard earlier really shows how that we're creating opportunity from what once was quite a scary challenge. But the change to digital does demand fundamental change. The volumes of information are huge and the data sources are growing. 5 years ago, no one had heard of TikTok. Now everyone's asking us, how do you preserve it? In 5 years' time, or even 5 weeks' time, frankly, they might not have heard of it again. And that shows how quickly things can change. The formats are more complicated. The expectations of instant access are growing. People are expecting to get instant access to information as soon as it is created. The challenges of distance working are growing. We're definitely all seeing that all around the globe at the moment. And the whole paradigm is changing. Digital, when I started, was modeled on the paper paradigm of getting a box of papers years after they're created, sifting through it and saving it. Now we have to preserve history in real time as it happens live and make it available live. And the only way we can do that is with automation and simplicity. So I'm now going to pass over to Peter to discuss what challenges we and our customers are seeing and what we're doing to turn those challenges into opportunities. Thanks very much.
Thank you, John. As John says, my role is to focus on what the technology can do. And so you can focus on what you need to do without focusing on the technology. And so I want to do that in a collaborative way. I want to do that in a simplifying way. I want to harness the different feeds we get into the product. So Preservica focuses on active digital preservation. It's what we do, and it's at the heart of everything we do, looking after the bits, but also looking after the file formats, making things available in a usable format. And we do that, as John says, in a simple way, in a powerful way, and also we need automation to make it happen. And this has to be open, so we can make the content open. And as was discussed in the panel, the chosen open content made open and connected to other data feeds as the multiplicity, massive growth in different ways. Technology is creating, capturing, making content. We want to bring that in, and we want to do that in an easy, simple way to use for the starters, for the beginners, and move up to the more complex use cases for the more power user, or the person who's got more time to focus on the digital aspects of it. Everything we do is driven by our users. So we listen to our users vote on features, we bring that into the planning sessions. And once it's driven by the users and focused, it's also guided by the users and the community to tell us how to achieve that and what's the best way of achieving the solutions for the technology. And for those of you in the audience who haven't seen a digital preservation system, I'd like to share what one looks like. So it looks a lot like your laptop, folders, files, we call them assets, but it's files. And this is something that's very close to my heart. This is a product that, sorry, I'm looking for the play button. There we go. Go on, Erica, can you hit that? Thank you. So simple paradigm, easy to drag and drop content in, an engaging interface, metadata, keep it active, keep it up to date, look at the content, be it video or whatever format it's in, and enrich the metadata, but also then quickly respond to maybe freedom of information requests or other requests and showcase and make this content available in a way that's the content, metadata, and then perhaps share that with other people in the world by putting it to social media and other feeds, or email it to people and make it available. Quick word from our sponsors. The product you've just seen, we have a mini theatre tomorrow. Everybody in Preservica has been working really hard to simplify digital preservation and make this available to smaller, less technically able or less technically interested archives and archivists. And so please do come to the mini theatre tomorrow. Love to see you there. As I say, it's very close to our heart, as it is to everybody at Preservica. We're really proud of what we've created, and we'd love to share that with you. Now, we work with a wide range of people, and it's about 300 different organizations. So we see a lot of feeds, a lot of information sources that people want to bring into a unified store. So you can bring it in, enrich it, be it a website, be it audio visual, be it 3D, be it emails, be it social media. Bring that in a simplified, automated way, or a more manual craft way, if you like, and then make that available online, post it on the cloud, and adhere to the digital preservation principles, so we can make sure that this content is not only safe, not only accessible, if you want it to be, but also is usable in the format that you need to be able to use the content. So let's talk a little bit about the automating the content capture side of things. So we have a wide range of sources of information. How do we actually start bringing those in? One thing that's built into the product is website archiving. It allows you to set a time job or set it to automatically start harvesting at certain time periods. You can set which part of the website you want to, where you want to search, and then how far down in the hierarchy of the website you go. And then you can actually maybe reach out from your website to other content sources or whatever. And once it's in, there's that horrible word there, the WARC, web archive file. So once it's into Preservica, you can look at it, you can render it, you can actually see that website there, and the content is available to you as it looked on the day. Now, the new normal, or some of the old normal, that's not gone away, and we're still facing a lot of history happening around us. One of the things that's come to the fore is the need, partly for website archiving, but partly for Twitter and social media. As this becomes a more formal method of communication for organizations, our users want to capture tweets, metadata with the media that's in the tweet as well. And once they've captured a tweet, maybe swim upstream to get associated tweets that kick that off. And once it's captured, preserved, they want to be able to see it, but they also want to search it, find it in association with other forms of media, other forms of digital content, emails, scans, whatever. So you can find relevant information, including Twitter, at that time. Now, this is something we're working on in the labs. It's something we're innovating at the moment. We've got a few users piloting and testing and proving the concept, and we're working to get this into the product in the coming releases that we're building. Other forms of data, other forms of information are the automated archiving from content management systems. You probably know them as OpenText or SharePoint or other types of corporate or organizational data. And the idea here is that you don't want to actually go manually to get this information. You want to set search criteria or flags within your content management and bring that into a preservation system, make that available to everybody as well. So preservation is at the core of everything we do, and to make it the core of everything we do, we use something we know as APIs. Now, some of you in the audience will say, APIs, yes, I like those, they're open, they're usable, I know what I'm doing with APIs. And if so, there's a website, developers.preservica.com. They're available, they're open, they are there for the community to look at and compare and use to start using preservation system at the heart of other systems. And preservation here, the core, there's the functional areas around the outside. So let's have a look at some of the functional areas. One, once the content is in, you want to actively manage it. You want to look after it. you want to link it to archive, catalog systems, you want to archive it in accordance with other guides as well, and maybe enrich the metadata with external systems such as AI or machine learning algorithms, so you can do facial recognition or scene description on the content and add that to your metadata whilst it's preserved. You also want to be able to make sure it's safe using ID management and security, so people you don't want to see the information don't see the information. Working around this, you also want to share the information. You want to make it available with other systems, perhaps ours based on WordPress, and we've got some examples of that. Or there's external systems you want to share this content with. And we look after the storage, whether it's on the cloud storage of your choice. And then that brings us back to the ingest acquisition, getting information into the system. So we have a wide range of data sources. They're looked after, the data's enriched, the file formats are looked after, the bits are looked after, the file formats are migrated to usable ones. We look after the storage, and then it's about making it available. And that making it available, we've got, if you go to our website, there's a link through there to active, what we call universal access, but these are portals to people's content. And you can see the universal access that comes as part of the standard product. But we also have people who have other tools, search and discovery tools that want to access the information. So here's an example, Ex Libris Primo, contacting, using information in Preservica. And I wanted to get the Manchester logo up there just to explain my weird accent. That's my hometown, so I just wanted to get that in. But there is the link to Primo that we're working on. And also, as I said, the link to catalog. So how do you link to archive space? How do you get information from Calm or AdLib to use Preservica digital content in maybe association with other, physical content in association with digital content in Preservica? And that brings me to automated digital preservation. I've spoken about automating connections and links and getting information in. I'll now pass over to John to talk about automated digital preservation.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, digital preservation is quite hard, quite complicated and quite technical. And it's what we like doing, but it may not be what you like doing. You like the product of it, that your information is safe, it's available, it's alive, but the detail of how to go through extremely complex file format decision making is not something that you really may not want to get involved in. So if we go on the next slide, we can see that we're trying to work on ways of automating file format preservation to make actions available for everyone. So for existing practitioners, we want to help make more appropriate digital preservation decisions to be automated. We want to make sure the content is in step with your policy, so you don't have to run complicated workflows. For novice users, we want you to just take the advice and use it. And for the wider community, we want to share that with the whole community, whether they use Preservica or not, all of our expertise together so we can all learn off each other. So let's look at that, how that would work out in practice. On the next slide, we can see that we've got this into a 4-step process. The first and most important thing is to share best practice with the whole digital preservation community. We all share together, whichever product we use, whether we're a global expert or someone with an opinion on how they want their information to be presented. The next is to create sets of rules that say, this is what I think I'd like to do. So I'd like all my videos to be available for streaming on my website. Okay, well, that's quite clear. We better do something about that. The next is just to apply those rules to everything at scale across millions of documents, which some of our customers have. Some will have tens or hundreds of millions of documents. And then we improve the foundations so that all of that works together. So let's look at the next slide, and we can see that the first part of this is to work together across products. across different commercial organisations and research organisations that we share information. And this is the Preservation Action Registries, PAR. We gave a presentation on this last week, and we're cooperating with Artifactual, OPF, Archivum, JISC. We're all sharing and showing each other our plumbing so that we can all learn from each other. And we want a lot more people to join this forum. We're in talks with people like NARA, like people like the British Library, to share their information using the same protocols. And then we can all look at the rules, compare and contrast, and very quickly improve our practice. And that's the idea. The commercial reality should not be a barrier to learning, and we're very, very much pushing that. The next step on the next slide is automated format preservation. So grouping those together into recommendations that users can choose without having to know all the different types of formats. So if they say, I want to convert audio so I can listen online, that should be enough. They shouldn't have to go through and identify every possible audio format you've ever heard of and say what to do with it. And so just making common sense decisions. And what that actually results in, the complicated actions under the bonnet, should be managed by the community specialists, continual improvements and continual updates. Having selected those rules, you just want that to happen. And so we want that to always apply when you ingest stuff. But after ingest, if you change the rules, we want to change the way the information is represented internally to keep in step with your information. The first one of those is easy. The second one is very hard. Because if you say, having ingested 5 million audio files, actually I'd like to listen to them all online, we've now got to migrate 5 million files. So it's quite a technical challenge, but for you as a user, it should just work, and that's what we're trying to build towards. And on the next slide, we can see that we also need to improve the plumbing, the stuff under the bonnet to do these. We added 89 different migrations in the last release. We're working on complex data types such as GIS, 3D, tweets, scanned books. These don't just have one file, they're made up of many files. We have to identify them, we have to render them, migrate them, and we're going to be releasing those fairly shortly. We need to work together as a community on what to do about some of the more gnarly, knotty problems like Camera Raw. There's an online discussion going on at the moment about that. Spreadsheets are very complicated, CAD and GIS. Data, what do we do about databases? The NAR advice just published had lots of advice on what to do about databases, but no tools to do it. We should work together as a community to solve those, and so that we can all then roll those out, whichever product we choose. And we constantly need to be validating that what we're doing is correct, so that you can just tick a box and say, do this, and the system will say, okay, well, 0.5% of these files didn't work, something went wrong, you better have a look at these. And we can work on those knotty problems and not the whole thing. So these are some of the things my innovation team is working on to make life easier, more automated for the regular user. The expert user will hopefully be inspired to cooperate and work with us on solving these problems, because whatever they come up with is shared with everyone, regardless of how they implement it. And together as a community, we can make sure that the information that you hold so dear is preserved, it's available, it's usable, and it's consumed, because that's what we want. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you found that informative. And I'm going to pass now back to Erica to finish up.
Great. Thank you so much, John. So I'm just going to close out the session in general here. Just a quick reminder from the video that Peter showed earlier. For those of you that are going to the SAA sections, we are going to have a mini theater tomorrow. We'll be previewing our soon-to-come digital preservation solution for all different and for smaller institutions to make it affordable and accessible to everyone. And then if you have any questions, because we don't have any time today, we encourage you, if you're going to SAA, to visit us at the Preservica virtual booth or email us at info@preservica.com. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope to see you at future webinars or at some of our SAA events during the next few days. Have a great day.